This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So we'll be starting our next topic, that is physical samples management. Okay. So the topics that we are going to cover in physical samples management, we will see what is physical samples management, how to plan the physical samples, planning of the physical sample categories, what are the different types of physical samples are there, then use of sample drawing procedure. What is sample drawing procedure, how it is used, then inspection lot processing with physical samples. Okay, how the inspection lot is processed using physical samples. Then we will cover inspection process using unplanned physical samples. Okay, and how to create manual creation of physical samples, and then creation of inspection lot for manual physical samples. Okay, so these are the topics we will be covering in the physical samples management. So basically, what happens is, when you inspect a material upon good receipt, you typically draw physical samples from a readily available known quantity of goods or materials. So normally what you do is, you draw the samples from the basically from the contain basically from the containers. Okay. Okay, so basically what happens here is, you when you sometimes what happens is, the goods are usually delivered in one or more containers from which you draw the physical sample. So it's not that all the time the material is delivered only in one container or in one box. Okay, so it may be possible that they may deliver this from one or more containers. So in that case, the requirement is to draw the sample from the each container, let's say. So in that case, you will use this physical sample scenario. Okay. So basically, the system determines the scope of the physical sample drawing from the information in the inspection plan and assigned sample drawing procedure. So what is the sample drawing procedure? We will discuss. So basically, in the sample drawing procedure, you will have a sample drawing instruction. In that, you will maintain how many physical samples you must draw from the available quantity of goods, and then how to distribute physical samples among the laboratories for inspection. So basically, in the sample drawing procedure will have a sample drawing instruction. In that, you will maintain how many physical samples you need to withdraw. Okay. So this is the one basically. So basically, sometimes what happens is, um, when you receive the material, let's say you received in 6 barrels. So the requirement is to take sample from each barrel, and you inspect all these samples basically. And let's say sometimes you receive the material in 12 pallets. Okay, and the requirement is to take sample from each pallet. Okay, and sometimes let's say you receive a material in 3 boxes. So requirement is to take sample from each box. Okay? So in those kind of scenarios, you will be using this physical sample management. To identify that sample taken from each container, you will use this physical sample management process. Okay. So now, uh, before going into the sample drawing procedure, we will understand physical sample categories. Let's talk about physical sample categories. So basically, there are 3 types of physical sample categories. Okay, so basically, okay, so basically you have primary samples, pooled samples, and reserve samples. Okay, we will discuss what is this primary samples, pooled samples, and reserve samples. Okay, so basically what happens is these physical sample categories will determine your total sample size basically. So when drawing physical samples, there are the following physical sample categories. One is primary samples. Primary samples are taken directly from the population. So primary samples are directly taken from the your total quantity. Suppose let's say if you see here, you received the material in 6 containers, 6 barrels. From each barrel you are taking a sample. So that means totally your primary samples are 6. You are taking sample from each container. Okay, so that means your primary samples are 6. Let's say you received a material in 12 pallets. So you are taking sample from each pallet. Then your primary samples are 12 primary samples. That means primary samples are always directly taken from the population, from the total quantity. That is primary samples. Next one is pooled sample. Pooled sample, they are created by pooling the primary samples. That means you take primary samples, you mix them to create a pooled sample. Pooled sample is not directly taken from the lot. They are just created by mixing the primary sample. Now the next one is the reserve sample. Reserve samples are the primary samples that are reserved as specimen samples. They are just stored for the storage. Reserve samples are taken and they are just stored. And in some industries they call it as control samples. Then in some industries they call it as storage samples. It depends. Okay, whether you call reserve sample, control sample, okay, storage sample, all are same. They are just stored. That's all. They are not for quality inspection. So normally what happens is they take primary samples and they will pool them, mix them to create pooled samples. Normally they inspect these pooled samples. That's how we have. So basically we have 3 categories: primary, pooled, and reserve samples. Okay. Okay. Let's okay. So now how these physical samples are created. Okay. So physical samples can be created automatically. Okay, and they can be created manually. So automatically means it's a planned one. So these whatever we discussed just now, primary, pooled, and reserve samples, they can be created automatically, means you are planning them in advance. So to create them automatically you need sample drawing procedure. Now we will discuss the sample drawing procedure. Another method is manual, means unplanned method. So whenever you need, you can create the physical samples manually also. Both options are possible. So first we will discuss the automatic one, and then we will discuss manual. Both options are possible. Okay. So to create the physical samples automatically, we need sample drawing procedure. Sample drawing procedure. Now we will talk about sample drawing procedure. Okay. Sample drawing procedure. Okay. Sample drawing procedure. So what we do is first we will create the sample drawing procedure. Okay. Then we will assign it to the inspection plan. Okay. In the sample drawing procedure, you will maintain all the info, required info, and this you will assign it to the inspection plan. This is a step 1. Now, whenever the inspection lot is created, system automatically creates the physical sample records. So it will create primary, whatever pooled or reserve, whatever the samples are there, it will create. Okay. So basically, this is how it happens basically. Okay. So you have inspection plan. Okay, in the inspection plan, you will assign the sample drawing procedure. Sample drawing procedure. Okay, procedure. In this sample drawing procedure, you will maintain how many primary you need, primary, how many pooled sample, and then how many reserve sample, reserve sample, reserve, reserve sample. So in the sample drawing procedure, you maintain this info, and this sample drawing procedure ultimately is assigned to the inspection. That's what it's going to happen. Okay, and these primary, pooled, and reserve samples are called basically physical samples. Physical samples. Physical samples. Okay. In the sample drawing procedure, you maintain this information. Okay. So this is how the sample drawing procedure is used. Okay. So the sample drawing procedure. What is sample drawing procedures? Sample drawing procedure is a master data record that is defined in the task list header and controls the drawing and formation of physical samples. That's what we discussed. So basically, this sample drawing procedure is maintained in the task list header in the inspection plan, and it controls the how many samples we need to draw and also formation of the physical samples. Okay, you also define the number of physical samples and the physical sample container in the sample drawing item. Okay, so basically in the sample drawing procedure, you will maintain what are the number of the physical samples and their containers also, in which container we need to take. Okay, so this sample drawing item contains sample categories. Okay, whether primary, pooled, or reserve, their number of physical samples, their size. Sometimes you have to maintain size, and lot container, in which container the inspection lot, and the physical sample container, in which container these physical samples. All this information is maintained in the sample drawing procedure. Sample drawing procedure. Okay. So this is the one. You create the sample drawing procedure, and this sample drawing procedure is assigned to the inspection plan. Okay. Okay. So it is maintained in the ultimately it is assigned to the inspection plan. So now we will create the sample drawing procedure. So in our case, what I will do, I'll take a simple scenario. Let's say you have a material ABC123. Okay, you have a material ABC123. This material, when you receive, you have to take two primary samples, two primary samples, and one pooled sample, and one reserve sample. This is what we want to take. Okay, so I want two primary samples to be taken, and those are mixed into one pooled sample, and I want to take one reserve sample. This is my requirement. Okay, so now let's create the sample drawing procedure. Okay, so let's go to the system. Okay, go to logistics, go to quality management, go to quality planning. Okay, go to basic data. Here you have sampling. Open this. Here you have sample drawing procedure. Open this. Here QPV2. Double click. Okay, here already you have some sample